and a warm welcome to everyone on behalf of CIO&Leader and the 9.9 group to today's CIO Gurukul session. Our guest today is Mr. Vijay Sethi, Chairman and Chief Mentor at Mentorkart. So, through his long and distinguished career, Mr. Sethi has been extensively involved in shaping digital transformation strategies and assisting organizations in harnessing the full potential of people and technology without losing focus on sustainability. He's a strong advocate for cutting-edge digital technologies, including cloud, mobility, AI, RPA, AR and VR, IoT, and quantum computing. And he continues to advise numerous startups exploring these areas. With nearly 35 years of experience in both manufacturing industry and consulting, Mr. Sethi has worked previously with Hero MotoCorp as CIO and Head HR and CSR, Director of Business Solutions at Ranbaxy, and as a management consultant at TCS. He currently advises many startups on technology and business strategy. Mr. Sethi is the recipient of numerous professional awards and recognitions, including the CIO Samman. He has also been part of the Next 100 jury for many years. In today's conversation with Mr. Sethi, we will discuss how to create an effective digital transformation strategy and the steps IT leaders can take to ensure success. So over the past couple of years, there has been much discussion around rewiring the way an organization operates while leveraging tech at scale. The primary objective of digital transformation is building a sustainable competitive advantage for the organization and improving customer experiences and reducing costs. But the question is, what differentiates digital transformation from business transformation? According to McKinsey, the distinction is subtle but important. Business transformation usually ends once a new behavior has been achieved. However, digital transformations are long-term efforts to rewire how an organization continuously improves and changes. In fact, successful digital transformations depend less on how companies use digital and more on how they become digital. So let me begin by asking Mr. Sethi, what can be an enterprise CEO's objectives for digital transformation? What should go into the IT strategy?
Thank you, Giri. Thank you. And good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for inviting me for this session. And as you rightly said, there's a difference between business transformation and digital transformation and the points that you said. I really like the way you put the context. Thank you for that. Coming to the CIO and the primary objectives of a CIO from digital transformation, to me, I'll just put in 3 or 4 of them to be brief. Number one, the very first thing is business alignment. Whatever a CIO does for digital transformation, it has to align to business. It cannot be just because the CIO feels that this should be done and it does not have a connection back into business, then there's not digital transformation. Because the objective is, I'm digitally transforming business. So that's point number one. The second thing that primary objective from a CIO perspective has to be that any digital transformation initiative has to keep customer at the center of the entire journey. So how does the CIO ensure that all digital transformation initiatives enhance the customer experience, enhance the customer centricity of the organization? So that's point number 2. Now coming back to the technology piece of it, since CIO is also the technical leader of the organization apart from being the C-suite leader, one of the objectives that a CIO needs to ensure is the solutions that are put up are scalable and are flexible. Because especially when you put in digital transformation initiatives, a lot of times the solutions are not scalable. The fourth, I would put it is that in the entire thing, if the business has to take advantage of digital transformation initiatives, data analytics plays a huge role. CIO has to have a business objective that data analytics plays a key role in the entire digital transformation journey. And the fifth and last is that I'll just put in 5 for the day, security and compliance. Especially when you get into anything related to digital transformation, there are times when the security piece is kind of left somewhere because people are running after implementing a particular technology, trying to show it to the business that this thing works, trying to integrate it with other areas. And in the entire play, the security, the compliance, the entire thing gets lost somewhere. So CIO needs to ensure that one of his or her primary focus also has to be, or objective has to be, ensuring security and compliance.
Thank you, Mr. Sethi. I think you have made some very useful, 5-point agenda for the CIO strategy. The one thing I wanted to ask you, just touching upon the strategy part, is that how long, or what is the time frame for the strategy that a CIO should look for, especially when it comes to digital transformation?
I think you answered it, Giri, when you spoke about that digital transformation is an ongoing thing and business transformation is when you achieve a particular objective. So to me, as I see, digital transformation is not a project. It's a journey. The only thing in the strategy is that the strategy keeps on evolving at all times. As you move to the next step, it evolves. So there is no strategy which has to be cast in stone. But you can't even put a time frame for that this strategy is for 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. To me, if practically I can review my strategic plan every 6 months, I'll be doing a good job.
Thank you for that clarification. So, coming to one of the pillars of the strategy, which at least CIO as a technology leader. So, what does the CIO need to do to ensure that the right technology is made available? And of course, made available in the form that is usable to everyone in the organization that needs it. And how do all these new technologies like AI, blockchain, digital twins, how will all these fit in?
See, I think let's take these questions into two parts. First, talk of how does a technology really get into and get used in the organization. Then I'll come to the technologies that you spoke. To me, if one has to look at a technology getting implemented or used in an organization, a CIO has to address two key areas. Number one, the entire technology is accessible to whosoever needs it. And second, when people get that technology, and for a minute I'm assuming the technology has been implemented well. That's a separate discussion. I'll come to it. But once the technology is implemented, it has to be accessible to all who should use it. And second, those who are using it should be able to leverage this technology effectively. Now, what do I mean by this? To ensure that technology is accessible to all the people, the first part. A lot of times in the organizations, the policies, the processes do not allow certain technologies to be taken to certain levels. So we need to ensure. So it has starts from the basic, the concept of people, process, technology. Let me start with the policy and the process piece. There a lot of processes and policies in the organization need to be changed. From a people perspective, there has to be huge focus on training of all the employees, for testing of all the entire thing, and getting a regular user feedback on the usage or the constraints that you may be facing. Okay. Now, coming to the first piece, when we have to implement the technology, we need to also remember that many of the technologies that you put in as part of digital transformation are coming in the organization for the first time. Okay, we may feel some of them may not be even mature, where you are talking of certain technology which may not be fully mature. So here, there has to be a mindset building that a CIO needs to ensure in the organization, that if a technology comes in, there are chances that it may not give the desired results in phase one or in the first implementation. So you have to have a risk-taking culture, risk-taking ability in the organization. So where you also, as CIO, get into changing the culture of the organization. So this is how I see. Now, coming to the second piece of your question, where you spoke about some of the technologies like digital twin and quantum and others you spoke about. Now, all these technologies, as I see, are forming part or would form the part of a digital strategy of an organization. Digital twin, for example, has been there now for what, 7, 8 years. I remember having implemented digital twins some 5, 6, 7 years back, but now it's becoming much more popular, where you create a digital avatar, if I can use that word, of a physical thing. It could be your manufacturing line, it could be something, a product or any such thing. And then you do all the simulations on top of it. Now, what digital twin really helps you is ensuring that if you have to make certain changes in the physical layout, physical product, or any such thing, if you do it on a digital avatar, your cost of doing those changes is very less, number one. Number two, the number of iterations that you can do is very, very high, because if you're doing some physical change in the layout of a particular factory, you can just do once, twice, and it will be too time consuming. If you're on a laptop using a digital twin, you can do tons of things. And at the second end, if you have to train people, you can't really train physically in a lot of environments where digital twin again plays a huge role. So digital twin is very AI, ML, various other technologies are coming in today. Quantum, you spoke about. Quantum computing to me is, from an India perspective, I think it's slightly far off, maybe 1 year down the line, 1.5 years down the line. But certain companies in automotive sector, in some of the other sectors, have already started doing some POCs on that.
Very, very interesting, sir. So if, just relating to technology, if we can touch upon another bugbear, I would say, of most CIOs is shadow IT. We talk about, having a culture of risk taking, innovation, but then where does shadow IT fit?
See, I think fantastic. See, shadow IT, number one, a lot of companies say that in their company, shadow IT does not exist. I'll put it, they don't know. It's like cybersecurity. We say there's no threat. Actually, we don't know the threats. So shadow IT exists in almost all the companies. Only the degree could vary. Now, we have to first look at what are the reasons why shadow IT is increasing, and only then you can reduce it to bare minimum. So while one thinks that one of the reasons why shadow IT is increasing is because even in other functions, departments, there are a lot of people who today are IT savvy. A lot of people in sales, manufacturing, others would be those even who would know more of Java programming in their 12th class and engineering than many of the IT people. So we think that these guys know IT, so they want to run IT. To me, while that's a limited thing, one of the biggest reasons for shadow IT is not able to provide the services which the departments want. And in their frustrations, they really go back and go out. So how one has to reduce shadow IT is to look inside rather than look outside. Rather than blaming other departments, there's a shadow IT. If I can look inside and say as to why the shadow IT is because of me, am I really not providing that service? Or am I not providing the quality of service? Is it timely service? Is it the cost that at which I provide services much higher than what outsiders give? So I say that I'll develop an app in 3 months. This guy knows that I go out and within 3 days an app can be developed. Why would he come back to me? He would never. So shadow IT exists. It's a major bugbear. But to me, only the CIOs with their own policies, team, and way of working can really reduce it significantly.
So thank you very much for tackling that, contentious question very head on, but really appreciate your very candid view about, shadow IT. I think as you have mentioned, it's something we have to live with. It's a question of how the CIO strategically manages shadow IT and manages to reduce it. Coming to another point that you mentioned among your 5 pillars was, data and the governance of data. So of course, reliable and current data everybody needs so that they can work efficiently and the organization can work well. But how do you advise CIOs to put in place the processes and mechanisms to collect, process, store, and then govern this data?
Wonderful. I think you're right, Giri. Data is the pillar of any digital transformation. Okay, coming back to again, let me just put in maybe 4 or 5 points on what I personally think from a data perspective that companies or CIOs need to do is, number one, put in a practice, policy, process, technology, governance, whatever, on how a data is collected in the organization, how it is managed, how it is updated, how it is used, how it is archived. Because reality is most of the companies do not have that basic data governance practice or a policy. जो आ रहा है चलने दो, जैसा आ रहा है चलने दो, rather than having a formal policy. So we need to, the first thing that we need to put is a data governance policy as to how the entire data is managed. The second piece that should also cover how do we ensure quality of data, because a lot of things keep on updating. So there's a vendor, the vendor's location changes, customer location changes, the corresponding person changes, their email ID changes, any of those things. So there has to be a formal mechanism on ensuring that the quality of data is maintained. Otherwise, bad data will lead to bad results. So what I call is a formal process of data lifecycle management. Kind of from hire to retire, from the time a data enters your system to the time a data has to go out. So if we can have a formal data lifecycle management process, which most of the organizations do not have, I think that will be one big thing. The second is, again, can I put in, and that's just a random thought, which I personally think can really help in data. Can I have a process of data compliance and auditing? A lot of people have an IT compliance, IT auditing, software compliance, software auditing, but not very many people talk about data compliance and auditing. Can there be a periodic audit of as to what is going into my core systems or any of the systems? Is it number one going correctly? Correct data is good, and is someone auditing it? So can I put in a process of data compliance and data auditing? Think about it, and it's really. And the last piece I'll say on this one is the CIO should always remember one thing. While data is his responsibility, data is actually not his responsibility. So it's a contradictory kind of thing. So that is where a huge amount of collaboration with the business is required. For example, the CIO can come back. How do I know that Giri is my customer or Giri's house number is 7? How do I know? Who am I to? Only the guy who's my sales guy should know that. Okay. So that is where there's a huge amount of collaboration between the business and the IT team or the CIO to ensure that the quality of data and the entire data lifecycle management is managed. But data is very, very important, as you rightly said.
So another related question to data, which is now coming up for all IT professionals and IT leaders, is the DPDP Act, and how will that impact the way you govern data? So
Absolutely.
we'd like to hear your thoughts on that. What's
And
going
the
to
fine associated with it, which is very, very high fine, steep fine of up to 50 odd crore rupees with DPDP. So I think at the end of the day, to me, it is about having a culture of information security, compliance, data privacy in the organization. How do I ensure that everyone really complies? Because I cannot go to everybody, see it, and ensure that they are complying to the data privacy act. But if there's a culture, and then I have, of course, put in the data lifecycle management process in and do a periodic audits, as I spoke about, I will ensure that the privacy things is there. But one of the things that we need to do from a DPDP perspective also is to make people aware of what is their role and responsibility. Just by putting it on a website that I have a DPO, my DPO does this or is supposed to do this, my department is supposed to do this. I put it that on website, but my internal people don't have even any clarity on what is expected from them in terms of data privacy. It will never work. So there has to be a huge training of people on DPD.
So essentially, what you are saying is a cultural change is required on just looking at data and seeing it as an asset.
And managing that. And
managing. Yes. Thank you. So effective digital transformations also require, some cross-functional teams to execute various initiatives. So does this imply that companies will need to rethink the way they operate?
Absolutely. 200% agree with you. They have to rethink. You cannot, if I go back even in IT days, we always used to say that. But more we get into digital transformation or these initiatives, the cross-functional collaboration is becoming even much more important. It's not something very new. A lot of companies, we always heard that the IT department works in its own silos, other department. But for a digital transformation to succeed, number one, as you rightly said, cross-functional collaboration is must. Otherwise, it will not work. Because when I go to any of the digital transformation initiatives or projects, one of the key success factors, there'll be various, but if I were to just pick one out of them, is something called agility, the speed of decision making. Now, if there's not good collaboration, cross-functional collaboration, your decision will get stuck in one of those silos, and you won't even know as to where it is stuck. So that is where your testing has to be there, training has to be there. All those things are secondary, but even the basic stuff could get the setting up of objectives could get stuck in case the collaboration is not there. The second I would put in is that, which I spoke earlier, the customer centricity. Again, when you look from the reorientation of the company's orientation has to move on to a customer centricity, where customer is at the center of entire digital piece, as I spoke earlier. Third is the point that you spoke about in the previous question, where a change in the organization is required, is to get into a data-driven decision-making culture. And that to me is one of my favorite, because I can't be really getting the digital transformation initiative and say, नहीं नहीं ठीक है सारा कर लिया, PPT में बना के ले आओ. No, that's a static data. It doesn't help anyone at all. Can people really take job? Someone comes and says that I have 26 years of experience, so I know what to do. I don't even care what my AML algorithm says or any other algorithm says. You please go and do this. So then your digital transformation initiatives will fall flat. So that is where having a data-driven decision-making culture is very, very important in the organization. The last piece I'll again say over here is building a culture in the organization which is a risk-taking culture. Many of these projects will have their own issues. And to round it up from a business IT collaboration perspective, or the changing the way of working, I think if companies can also work on something like a digital COE, a digital center of excellence, where people from various function or businesses and IT work together on some of these initiatives, the amount of collaboration will be very, very.
So a related question, really from a very practical perspective. In large organizations, you have multiple departments and you have multiple, as we call it, power centers. So how do you get them to collaborate? I mean, given that it's the CIO's thankless job to get them to, give up some of their powers.
I think number one, this exists. I don't think anyone can deny that. That is where, as they say, culture always flows from top. The change management has to begin from top. Any digital transformation initiative would succeed if and only if it has full buy-in from your executive leadership. It cannot be seen as an IT initiative. It cannot be seen as a CIO initiative. But if the entire executive leadership team of the organization does not buy in, the entire thing would fail. That is why we know that there are enough statistics which say that more than 80-85% of digital transformation initiatives actually fail. And by fail, I mean they either kind of get lost on the way, or they never meet the objectives for which they started with. And one of the key reasons, as you rightly pointed out, is this power centers and the silos and my area, your area. Why should you get into my area? Those kind of things.
So do you have any advice for a CIO who is trying to navigate this in the organization? Because obviously, the CIO is trying to make this successful. And because it's a digital transformation, he's sort of, whether he likes it or not, he's seen as the champion of this initiative. So what advice do you have, in trying to do this change management more effectively?
I think the first, the CIO has to see whether the CEO and other executive leaders have really bought in. You should not start these initiatives just because your neighbor is doing it, your friend is doing it, you heard it in a conference and started. But it has to start with a business objective in mind. And it has to start with when there's a obvious buy-in or a pull from these guys. If it is not there, just say that we are not ready for digital transformation. See, if I just go back one step now, is digital transformation mandatory? Of course it is mandatory. I'm not even debating that. But there are people who might not want to get into at this stage, and they'll say that, okay, let me just do a digital modernization. Let me do automation. Let me do integration of certain things, and at least achieve some slight efficiency improvements or some bit of efficiency improvement. Digital transformation would give me a huge one. So if the CIO is not getting any support, then CIO cannot really do a digital transformation. Or he has to then first get into mindset change of the leadership.
So A related point, which is that, very often today you have CEOs attending some conference and then they are told, oh, your company, if it doesn't have this XYZ technology, then, you're doomed. CEO comes back, calls the CIO. We should tomorrow have AI. Then how does the CIO tackle this kind of thing when he knows the ground situation is we are not ready?
See, again, I think while you think that, and of course, that it is today it's happening, but the reality is, I remember 25 years back, 30 years back, the ERP in one of the organization actually started that way, where the CEO actually heard in some conference or somewhere in some meeting that companies in India have started implementing, or companies in US have started implementing ERP. Why don't you implement it in India? So that thing has been going on. And to me, that could be a big positive driver for the CIO, that at least the CEO has owned this. So the first step the CIO has to is to now educate the CEO. Because there are a lot of times when I come back and say that, okay, this has to be done. But someone has to tell me and say that if you have to do this, if you go to class 7, first at least go through class 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or at least you jump 1 or 2 classes, or you can't jump 7 classes at one go. So there has to be some basic things in the organization. So CEO has to be told of those things, what can be done, what cannot be done. And then CEO has to be told that you are the champion, you are the owner. Let's call the entire executive team. I'll share as CEO, share with them as to this is what we want to achieve. This is what the pitfalls could be, or these are the positives. And let's hear everybody out before we jump into and go out and start looking at vendors who will be actually looking at the technology. And tomorrow I call 4 vendors, AI, aisa wala acha kar do, waisa wala acha kar do. It's going to fall flat.
Thank you. I think, that's another point that I think a lot of people need to internalize, that, as you have said, the champion has to be from the top. Otherwise, it's bound to not succeed or not succeed enough for it to make a
Absolutely.
difference.
Absolutely.
So, when we are talking about digital transformation, doing organizational change, doing continuous change, one of the things that we need is talent. And it has been remarked, no company can outsource its way to digital excellence. So how do you attract and retain the IT talent which is needed to do this digital transformation, particularly when there is so much, change happening?
So I think I'll start with my favorite quote on that. As I personally, I quote that very frequently. It's like water, water everywhere, and not a drop
Drop
to
to
drink.
drink.
So we have tons of people today. We say that India is, the world is churning out so many engineers and experts and so many training courses happening on all possible technologies. But when you talk to certain people, the quality that you never get. You don't know where those guys are. So to me, there are two things in the entire thing. One, attraction of talent, and second is retention. And both of them are very important. There are companies who focus just on retention. There are companies who focus just on attraction. And when someone gets in, they don't even care about what is happening to your current employees. So I think the focus has to be number one, both on attraction and retention. There are certain parameters to me which are common for both attraction and retention. And then, of course, there are some differentiating factors, and I'll talk about that. But to me, the biggest factor, both for attraction and retention, is the culture of the company. While we feel that culture is something which is internal, external people won't know. But the reality is, all my internal employees are also part of the society. My ex-employees are also part of the society. My prospective employees are also part of the society. So my company culture goes out. The information about my company culture goes out. If it's a very positive culture, my current employees become my brand ambassadors. Okay, they help me attract them, and they are themselves retained. So the first thing that companies need to ensure is have a culture which is, from a digital transformation perspective, if I can say, which is progressive, digitally savvy, which is enables the risk taking, which is a good rewarding culture, even if there are issues, but it actually rewards your efforts. That's one. The second, in today's time, both for attraction and retention, is, and that has really changed over the last 2, 3 years, is because of thanks to COVID and aftermath, which is flexible work arrangements or flexible work schedule. I know there are a lot of companies who want to now call back people and are kind of giving advisories. We here read all those things. But a lot of employees today feel much more happier to work with those organizations which have flexible work arrangements. Maybe earlier they were not, but now with last 3 years experience, people are getting used to that kind of thing. So that becomes a major factor from both retention and attraction perspective. Third, I'll put again five over here. The third to me would be more for retention. And when talking of attraction, there are some people who ask that question, but retention, it plays a huge role is professional development of individuals. How much you actually invest in developing those guys? Because when you're doing, for example, digital transformation initiative, are you really investing in people on AI technologies? Make them experts on it. Can you build certain COEs within the organization? Buy stuff for IoT? Give them that money? Please try out. So are you really helping them in their professional development? Or you say, no, no, you take your own things. I don't even care. I have just wanted you to do. So there people will not be. The fourth, if I would, and along with that, maybe kind of in the development, mentoring, coaching, all those things would be part of this. And fourth, I would put it is the recognition and rewards. That plays a huge role. And the last, I'll not really get into too many, but last from fifth perspective, both for attraction and retention, and more for attraction these days is the compensation. That plays a huge role in today's time from attraction perspective.
A related question to talent, in the IT space, what is your view about women in the workforce? I mean, do you see it increasing, or is it just constant, or is it decreasing?
I think it again depends. If I look from various functions perspective, HR and IT will be those two functions where perhaps the women percentage is much higher. And it is increasing, as I personally see. The only thing that we need to do is, especially from a women perspective, if we can have policies within the organization which are more flexible, okay? Flexi working times. You can't really ever spend time that if the office starts at 10, you have to be there at 10. Office ends at 5. You can't leave at 4:55. You have to come 5 days, 6 days, 7 days, whatever it means. So there is a bit of, if we can give flexibility. So the women participation in, especially in IT, would increase because there are a lot of things which women can do, which can be done work from home kind of environment. And if you are really driven by output and the quality of output, beyond a point, it should not make a difference whether you're sitting in office or sitting at home and doing things.
So, yeah, thank you. I think that's a useful perspective. Particularly, we see a lot of women dropping out of the workforce, and we lose a lot of talent.
Yeah, because of the personal issues, the time when kids have to be taken care, there are family issues, someone has to take care of mother-in-law, father-in-law, all those things do come in practically. So, but if you are giving them that flexibility and allowing them to work for force, what I've seen is there are a lot of times many of these women go overboard and would want to do extra things in case they have that flexibility because they also know that its organization is doing so much for them. Can I do
Contribute
an extra for the organization?
Right. Yeah. Thank you. So another thing which you have said quite a few times, which is about risk, and because when we are going through so much change, you said the organization needs to have a little bit of culture of risk taking. Even people need to be trained to take risks. Inherently, employees hesitate from taking risks. So what do you think are the major sort of risks or challenges associated with digital transformation, and how do we mitigate them?
So I think, as I said earlier, roughly around, as per statistics, ranging from 14, 15 odd percent to 20 odd percent projects succeed. Which means that these 15, 20% which would have succeeded despite certain risks or they would have faced certain challenges and those challenges would have been overcome. So if I was to again get into those 4 or 5 top challenges from my perspective, the first is resistance to change. Why should I change? I've been doing this for years. Why do you want? I'm very happy with my Excel or with my Power BI or with my other things. Why do you suddenly think of something called AI ML and then tell me कि इसको ऐसे करो? Well, let the thing do. I'm so good at taking a decision. If the machine is vibrating like this, I'll know that screw number 5 has to be tightened. Why do you need a IoT device to tell me all this? So there is that resistance to change. Or there are a lot of times people feel that these people have come and they won't allow me to learn some of these new things. I have been using a particular software for years or way of working. So there has to be huge focus on managing that change. Change management becomes a major part. That's one of the biggest cultures. And the second is, which lot of times the CIOs, CEOs, some of the other leaders feel that their organization is very digital savvy. The digital skills are very high. But the reality is, company actually lacks digital skills. So just because I'm good at Excel and can use all the formulas of VLOOKUPs and all others to do my things, it doesn't mean that if I get into a complicated software, I will know all the menus over there day one. Or if I've been using a particular ERP and those 3 screens which I'm aware, it doesn't mean that I'm actually digitally literate. So I need to focus on enhancing digital skills of the company, which becomes a challenge. The third, a lot of times, one of the risks that many of these projects fail is because the objectives of the project are not aligned with the business objectives. The business objectives keep on changing. You rightly put in that line where you said, how often do I need to change the strategy? There are times within 6 months, the entire world changes and the organization actually starts off thinking something different, that maybe this thing is not required. And I'm still going as CIO, getting and doing the same project which I thought 6 months, and I've not changed with the world. By the time I do that project, it's not required because the entire context has changed. So how do I need to ensure that the entire thing is aligned with the business? Fourth, one challenge that companies face or risks is the entire legacy systems. There's a new term which has come in called technical debt. All of us have heard of this. It becomes a challenge. How do you ensure that within the entire old infrastructure, all these new fancy things come in? And the fifth and last, again, I'll put it 5 this time, is the data security and privacy. That becomes a major risk and a challenge for a lot of digital transformation.
So just asking from a purely CIO or a technologist perspective, do you see technology risk also be there? Selecting a solution which perhaps won't scale or becomes obsolete by the time you are finished with it. Do you see that as a risk? Because a lot of these solutions are very early stage when you are starting with them.
I think my answer on that would be fail fast, fail cheap, learn from it, move on. You can never say that this technology is going to fail or get obsoleted in next 6 months. When you're starting the project, no one would want to bet on a technology which we know is already obsolete or going to be obsolete in next few months. But there are times when within 6 months, 3 months, suddenly the world changes so fast. No one expected Gen AI to come in, for example, a couple of years back. Okay. And now suddenly it is not, forget a couple of years back, even 1 year back. Now, suddenly it has taken over so many other things in the world. But doesn't mean that when a decision of someone who did many of these projects 1 year back and never considered the impact of Gen AI was wrong. No, because in the best interest of that person, they did what was the best at that time. So technology could become obsolete, but I wouldn't blame a CIO or even an executive leadership team on that. The reality is technology is evolving so fast that we need to catch up at all times. And that's where your revision of strategy comes in place.
So my sort of final question, and to everybody else who has joined this webinar, I encourage you to please put down your questions for Mr. Sethi, and we'll try to take them up, at the end of this session in a few minutes. My final question to you, Mr. Sethi, is, how do we measure the outcomes of a successful digital transformation? I know you have mentioned, out of 100, 85 will fail. So if we talk about the 15 successful ones, how do they measure success? What kind of metrics or KPIs should we use?
I think it's really very essential to measure the outcome. Even if you pass or fail, irrespective, but you would know whether you passed or failed only when you know what you are going to measure. So measurement criteria or outcome criteria are very, very important. To me, it has to be a combination of both business oriented and technical oriented criteria. You can't just have one of them. If I look from a business oriented perspective, why am I doing digital transformation when I'm setting the objectives right up front? Am I doing it for getting into a new business model, which will lead to a huge increase in my revenues? Or I am looking at revenue growth from my existing business? Am I looking at reducing my cost? Am I looking at reducing the cost of materials? Am I looking at increasing the efficiency? Am I looking at improving productivity by this percentage? So that baseline has to be set, the business objectives in terms of revenue growth, cost, efficiency, productivity, quality percentage, all those things, machine breakdowns, machine downtime, all those things have to be put in. And those are big, big parameters, customer satisfaction indexes. So they are big parameters as far as the starting point of a digital transformation journey from a business perspective is. Coming to a technology piece, again, they have to be that there has to be in terms of am I doing these projects in time, on budget, in quality, is the testing done? That's the technical parameters that I would do. And the third I would is a real parameter which would be from a CFO perspective, CEO perspective, should also be from a CIO perspective, is my ROI. I'm investing so much. The digital transformation initiatives are not going to be cheap. Cheap in sense, not cheap, but not in terms of lower cost. They will cost a lot of money to the company. And money is not direct money. It's also the involvement of all the people. So if you look at the total cost of ownership, the digital transformation initiatives are going to be very expensive. Okay. Am I getting those returns? If I'm spending 5 crores on a particular initiative, is my return going to be 5 crores in 6 months, 1 month? Or if it's going to be 5 years, I'm not even interested. So ROI has to be a major criteria in this entire thing. And last piece I would say is, which I started with, the digital transformation is mandatory. Am I doing digital transformation just because if I don't do, I'll not succeed or I'll not even survive? Then the entire matrix changes.
Right. Because then it's a question of existence or non-existence.
Because सारा जितना बना सारा profit सारा ROI है, return ही.
So I think Vikas Srivastav has a question for you. Is it that how do we define measurement criteria when it may not give a tangible benefit, rather it is to remove some debt or to simplify the operation?
Then it's not digital transformation. A very blunt answer. So there is a difference between automation, digital modernization, and digital transformation. When I'm removing just the technical debt, so if I have a say Oracle version X and I'm moving to Oracle version Y or SAP version X and moving on to Y or moving on to cloud from on-prem to this, that is modernizing. That's not digital transformation.
Thank you. And I know some people are raising their hands, but please post your questions in the Q&A box, because we are not going to be enabling the conversations on the system just now. Vinod Sharma has a question which is more about cultural change, that how can we, people show lots of resistance to change. So how can we manage this?
We spoke about change management, and one of the key roles of a CIO beyond technology and beyond the business part is being a change manager. There are enough and more ways, but if I was to just put 2 or 3, one, you need to be very clear telling people as to what is in it for them. People are a lot of times resistant to change because they are scared. They don't know what is going to happen, why they are doing it. So communication plays a huge role, and communication which has to be specific, not a goli baji, हाँ हो जाएगा ऐसा कर देंगे वैसा कर देंगे, but very specific as to how it is going to impact their lives, either positively or negatively. And also be honest and truthful in answering all their apprehensions. Half or 90% of your change management issues would get resolved if you do this, along with the very good training of people. Because there are a lot of times people are scared, will I be able to learn the new technologies? If you do these two things, 90% of your change management efforts would be taken care. Resistances would be taken care.
Thank you. I think that's a very practical piece of advice that you have given, and I hope we can, take that to heart. Job Thomas has a question that do we have an example of any company in India which has done digital transformation and actually changed their business model? If so, what have they done differently?
There'll be a lot of companies. I don't think we should get into any example of a specific company, but I can tell you that there are a lot of companies who have changed their business models because of digital. A lot of companies, many.
Then Chandan Chakravarti has a question. If digital transformation is a business model, then should it be in the IT agenda?
Chandan, does the IT exist for business or business exists for IT? If there's no business, there'll not be any IT. Remember this. So digital transformation has to be as much an IT agenda as a business agenda, both of them. That's where we spoke about collaboration, because if there's no business, there'll not be any IT. Remember this. It has to be combined. Collaboration is the name of the game these days.
Thanks for that reality check. So Arvind Kaul has a question that should we expect ROI on every digital transformation initiative?
Arvind, the answer is yes. If I look at from a pure business perspective, if I'm investing 1 rupee in anything, would not I expect a saving of 1 rupee? It could be in terms of reducing my current cost. It could be in terms of any other. It may not be a revenue thing. Even increasing efficiency, improving the quality of my product, improving productivity of my people, improving, forget anything and everything, improving my employee satisfaction or customer satisfaction. At the end, you can always measure and give a quantitative number to this, because a satisfied employee can give you 20 more things, a satisfied customer can give you many more things. So you can always quantify. It's only how do you quantify those so-called unquantifiables or so-called intangibles? That's the game.
So Vishal has an interesting question. It says most of the time IT product and service procurement goes through supply chain management and they go with L1. In the case CIO recommends a vendor, then they see it with a doubt. How do we handle such a situation?
विशाल ने बहुत सारों की दुखती रग पे हाथ रख दिया. No, but I think to me, there are times when it's about the culture of the organization. It is about what kind of relationship the IT department has, how much trust the supply chain department or others have on IT, and how much progressive looking the organization is. And yes, what he has put in is, I know that there are a lot of companies who face this issue, but it has to be overcome by doing a change management within IT and supply chain combined, where both of them have to agree in today's time, L1 may not be the best one. It's not about the low cost or the lowest cost. It is about highest return on my investment. If by spending 1 rupee, I get 80 paise. But if I was spending 2 rupees, I get 7 rupees back. I'd rather spend 2 rupees than get stuck with the 1 rupee. That mindset change has to be brought in. And that's where CIO has to play a huge role. CIO, along with maybe a CFO or CEO, they have to help in changing the mindset of the organization.
I think you put in a good point that you have to look for the greatest value rather than the lowest price. And so, the final question from Tejas Shah, that how do you manage balance between security and, new digital transformation initiatives across a big organizations like us, where user count is very large, and to complete even one cycle itself takes time.
Tejas, security is not about being small or big. Security has to be paramount for the smallest of the organizations and for the largest of the organizations. The only thing is, how do you put in a governance mechanism? How you can automate a lot of stuff to ensure that even for a large organization, some of these things might take much lesser time. But you have to, you use the word, as I heard Giri, you said, how do I maintain a balance between security and digital? To me, there's nothing like a balance over here. You can't say that no, both of them have to be 50-50, otherwise things don't work, or if this thing goes up, this thing goes down. So I think I give an example back from my automotive world is the better your brakes are, the faster you can go. So better you put in on security, more digital transformation you can do. So it's not a balance, but it is, you need to ensure that you give a huge focus to both of them.
So thank you, Mr. Sethi. I think you have, for sharing so many insights and for your sharing your expertise and knowledge. I'm sure everyone who has attended this session has found your viewpoints very useful and helpful. But however, we have run out of time, so we need to bring this session to a close. My thanks once again to Mr. Sethi and to all the delegates who attended this session. Posted questions and comments. We had a lot of them. I hope you found the webinar interesting and informative. Please send in your feedback and your comments to enable us organize more such sessions with industry leaders like Mr. Sethi. And we look forward to seeing you all on another session of CIO Gurukul. Meanwhile, it's goodbye from CIO&Leader and have a great week ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Giri. Thank you very much. Thank you to all the participants. Namaskar. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.